The rain fell in relentless sheets, blurring the dim lights of Lexington Avenue and turning the cracked sidewalks into treacherous rivers of cold water. Inside a nearly deserted diner, a young black waitress wiped down counters with tired hands, unaware that a simple act of kindness would soon alter her life forever. Her name was Serena Carter, and she had spent years surviving on double shifts, small tips, and an unwavering belief in compassion. That night, she spotted a fragile boy in a wheelchair, shivering alone outside in the storm. Without hesitation, she pulled him into the warm embrace of the diner, offering food, shelter, and a rare gift in a world often ruled by indifference: dignity. What Serena didn't know was that across the street, hidden behind the tinted windows of a sleek black Bentley, a billionaire was watching. His name was Raymond Holt, and he wasn't just any father. He was Daniel's father, and he had seen everything. In that fleeting moment, a debt was forged in silence. A debt so profound it would shatter walls, topple prejudices, and change lives in ways none of them could yet imagine. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from and hit subscribe to never miss a story that will change the way you see the world. The diner's fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting a pale glow on the battered linoleum floor. Serena Carter pushed Daniel's wheelchair closer to the radiator, draping a towel over his frail shoulders. She didn't ask questions that would shame him. She simply acted, her kindness woven into every careful movement. The grilled cheese sandwich she set before him wasn't gourmet, but it was prepared with the same care she would have given her own child. Across the street, Raymond Holt remained cloaked in the shadows of his Bentley, his hands steepled under his chin. His empire had been built on ruthless precision, on recognizing leverage where others saw none. Yet here before his eyes was a woman who extended compassion without asking for anything in return. It was an act so foreign to his world of contracts and negotiations that it unsettled him. Inside the diner, Serena laughed softly as Daniel devoured his meal. She wiped the corners of his mouth with a napkin, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. But beneath the surface, the loneliness of her existence pressed harder. A life of overlooked service, of invisible sacrifices, had taught her that kindness rarely earned rewards. Daniel's wheelchair squeaked as he shifted, pulling his threadbare blanket tighter. Serena noticed and immediately rose, fetching an extra fleece from the lost and found behind the counter. She wrapped it around him without fanfare, just a practical, human gesture. Daniel's wide blue eyes shone with unspoken gratitude. And still, across the street, Raymond watched. He had not intended for Daniel to wait so long. An urgent investor call had pulled him away, and when he had returned to the curb, this scene had already been unfolding. Serena's warmth contrasted so sharply with the indifference he expected from strangers that it left him momentarily adrift. No agenda, no recognition, just human decency. Yet as he observed, Raymond's mind did not simply soften. It calculated. He had learned long ago that nothing in life came free. Debts demanded payment. Serena Carter had unknowingly created an imbalance. And in Raymond Holt's world, imbalance was never left unchecked. Serena didn't notice the luxurious car idling across the street, nor the sharp-eyed man inside it. She had long since stopped expecting good things to watch over her. Life had taught her that if you wanted to survive, you made your own safety. You built your own walls. When the diner's door creaked open, a gust of icy air swept through the room. A woman entered, her jeans and hoodie blending with the casual crowd. But something about her was off. Too composed, too polished beneath the disguise. Serena's instincts bristled, but she forced a smile. Another customer, perhaps, or something else. The woman's sharp gaze landed on Daniel immediately. She moved toward him with a practiced grace and crouched beside his wheelchair. "Hey, champ," she said lightly, her voice sugary but firm. "Time to go." Daniel looked up, confusion wrinkling his small brow. Serena stepped forward, instinctively positioning herself closer to him. "You know her, sweetheart?" she asked gently. Daniel hesitated, a beat too long. The woman's smile stiffened. "I'm his aunt. His father sent me." Serena's chest tightened. She had seen this dance before. In neighborhoods where power wore different faces, where kids slipped through cracks without anyone noticing. She had no authority here, no right to intervene, but still, she hesitated. Daniel clutched the napkin in his lap, his small hands trembling. My, my dad said to wait, he murmured, almost apologetic. Serena forced herself to step back. The world she lived in didn't allow her to be reckless. A black woman pressing too hard in a situation like this wouldn't be seen as protective. She would be seen as a threat. Instead, she reached behind the counter and pulled a chocolate chip cookie, wrapping it carefully in wax paper. She knelt and pressed it into Daniel's hand. For the road, she whispered. The woman, Nora, straightened, her posture tense. She wheeled Daniel toward the door without another word. But just before they crossed the threshold, Nora glanced back over her shoulder. A glance that wasn't gratitude. It was warning. Outside, the Bentley's headlights flashed once. The rear door swung open, and Daniel was loaded inside. Raymond remained standing outside the car for a moment longer, letting the rain soak his expensive coat, watching Serena through the diner's fogged windows. She had seen Daniel. She had protected him. And now, whether she knew it or not, she had crossed into Raymond Holt's world, a world where debts were never forgotten. As the Bentley slid away into the rain, Serena wiped down the empty booth, her hands moving automatically. She tried to shake the chill that had settled in her bones, but it wasn't the cold that made her shiver. Something had changed tonight. She just didn't know how much yet. The rain had not stopped. It hammered the city like a relentless drum, beating down on broken sidewalks and leaking roofs. In her cramped, peeling apartment on West Fayette Street, Serena Carter leaned against the door after locking it behind her. The few tips she had earned tonight jingled weakly in her pocket, a brutal reminder that no matter how hard she worked, survival always sat on a knife's edge. She kicked off her soaked sneakers, rubbing the ache from her calves, but her mind wasn't on the physical pain. It was still tangled in the memory of Daniel's small, hesitant voice, the way he had clutched the napkin like it was armor against the world. That woman, Nora, hadn't been his aunt. Serena was sure of it. But what could she have done? What weight did her voice carry in a city that had never valued it? She was dragging herself toward the tiny kitchenette when a sharp knock rattled her door. Serena froze. No one visited her. Not at this hour. Not ever. Her instincts screamed caution, but curiosity won out. She peered through the peephole, and her stomach lurched. A tall man stood there, framed by the flickering hallway light. His black coat dripped rainwater onto the grimy floor. His gray eyes, sharp and assessing, pierced through the door like he could already see her. He didn't belong here. Everything about him, the cut of his coat, the polished leather shoes, the carved confidence in his posture, screamed a world that had never touched her own. Serena kept the chain latched as she cracked the door an inch. "Who is it?" she asked, voice tight. A beat of silence. "Then Raymond Holt," he said, his voice low, composed. The name meant nothing to her. "What do you want?" Another pause, then carefully. "To talk." Everything in her screamed to slam the door, but something deeper, a stubborn curiosity that had kept her alive this long, kept her hand steady. She opened the door wider, enough to see him fully. Broad-shouldered, mid-40s maybe. Handsome, but not in any comforting way. More like a knife, sleek, dangerous, gleaming. "I don't know you," she said. "No," he agreed. "But you know my son." Serena's heart thudded once, hard. Her mind raced, connecting dots at lightning speed. "Daniel," she breathed. Raymond gave a single nod. His expression never wavered. Not cold exactly, just measured. Like he was cataloging every reaction she had, weighing it against some invisible ledger in his mind. "I was across the street," he said. "Last night." "You were watching," she said flatly. "I was delayed." There was no apology in his tone, just a statement of fact. "I saw what you did." Serena folded her arms. "Feeding a kid who's freezing in the rain? Real revolutionary stuff." He studied her, really studied her. And then, without ceremony, he reached into his coat and pulled out a heavy, cream-colored envelope. He placed it carefully on the wobbly table behind her, like he was planting a flag. Serena didn't touch it. "What's that?" "A job offer." Serena let out a sharp bark of disbelief. "A job?" She laughed, short and bitter. You show up at my door in the middle of the night because I gave your kid a sandwich, and now you're offering me a job? Raymond didn't flinch. I don't believe in charity, he said. I believe in paying debts. Serena's mouth twisted. You think kindness is a transaction? In my world, Raymond said calmly, everything is. She stared at him, the rain pounding the windows behind her, the city buzzing low and dangerous in the background. Part of her wanted to throw the envelope back at him, to tell him exactly where he could shove his money, his job, his whole damn world. But another part, the part still aching from nights spent choosing between rent and groceries, made her hesitate. You don't even know me, she said quietly. I know enough, Raymond replied. I know you didn't see a powerful man's son. You saw a boy who needed help. You acted without expecting anything. That makes you rare. Serena's throat tightened. She hated how much those words cracked something in her. And what exactly is this job? She asked warily. Public relations, Raymond said. Negotiations, people management. Serena scoffed. You have 100 Ivy League robots who'd sell their souls for a shot at your company. Exactly, Raymond said. I don't trust them. Silence stretched between them, thick and electric. Finally, Serena reached for the envelope with trembling fingers. It was heavier than she expected. Thick paper, the kind rich people used for things that mattered. Inside, a contract. 6 figures. Full benefits. Relocation assistance. A door opening onto a life she had never even dared to imagine. Why me? She whispered. Raymond's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. Because, he said quietly, you saw my son. Not my fortune, not my name. Him. Serena stared at the contract, at the man who had all the power in the world, and still looked like he was afraid she might say no. She set the envelope down. I'll think about it, she said. Raymond gave a single, sharp nod. Then he turned and disappeared into the rain without another word. Serena stood frozen in her doorway, the envelope heavy in her hands, a storm swirling in her chest. She had just stepped into a world where kindness was a currency and debts were never forgotten. And whether she realized it or not, her life was about to change forever. The morning after, Serena Carter stood in front of the towering, steel and glass headquarters of Holt Dynamics, clutching a borrowed umbrella that barely kept the drizzle off her shoulders. She still wasn't sure if she belonged here. The building loomed above her like a gleaming fortress. Inside those walls, billions of dollars changed hands with a flick of a pen. Men like Raymond Holt made decisions that shaped cities, crushed competitors, determined who lived in comfort and who clawed to survive. And now somehow she was walking straight into the center of it. The security guard barely looked up as she showed her ID. His badge scanner beeped, and the glass doors whooshed open. Inside, everything was pristine. Marble floors polished to a mirror finish, chandeliers dripping from ceilings high enough to echo, receptionists with perfect smiles and sharper eyes. Serena felt every wrinkle in her department store blazer, every scuff on her second-hand heels, but she kept her chin up, her steps steady. She was used to entering spaces that weren't built for her. At the elevator, a man in a tailored gray suit gave her a once-over and subtly stepped further away, as if her very presence might tarnish his pressed trousers. She smiled at him sweetly, watching the discomfort flicker in his eyes. Good. She wasn't here to make them comfortable. The elevator dinged on the top floor. She stepped out into a hallway so silent it felt sacred. At the far end, double doors of frosted glass bore one name etched in silver: Raymond Holt, CEO. She squared her shoulders and knocked. Come in, came his voice. Inside, the office stretched wide and sleek, with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city skyline blurred by rain. Raymond sat behind a monolithic desk, gray eyes sharp, hands folded in front of him. You're early, he said, glancing at the clock. You're the one who said time is money, Serena replied coolly, moving to sit without waiting for permission. For a second, something like amusement flashed across his face. You're going to cause a lot of problems here, he said. That's the plan, Serena shot back. Raymond pushed a tablet across the desk toward her. Welcome to Holt Dynamics. Your first assignment. Serena scanned the file. A corporate restructuring proposal. Outsourcing jobs overseas. laying off hundreds of employees to boost quarterly profits. A neat, bloodless plan dressed up in corporate jargon. Her stomach turned. "You're going to present this to the board," Raymond said. Serena's head snapped up. "You're kidding." His face didn't move. "They need someone they can't dismiss easily," he said. "Someone they don't see coming." "You want me to be the pawn," Serena said flatly. "I want you to be the checkmate," Raymond corrected. Serena looked back at the tablet. Every number, every graph, every hollow justification screamed the same thing. Profits over people, efficiency over lives, business as usual. She slid the tablet back across the desk. "No." Raymond raised an eyebrow. "No. I'm not selling out families to pad someone's bonus," Serena said. Her voice was calm, controlled, but underneath it burned. "You hired me because I saw your son," she said, standing now, refusing to be dwarfed by him or this room. "Because I see people. And I'm telling you right now, if this company keeps eating its own, it'll rot from the inside out." A long, heavy silence stretched between them. Finally, Raymond leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers beneath his chin. "Good," he said. Serena blinked. "Good?" she echoed. He nodded once. "If you had agreed without a fight, I would have fired you on the spot." Serena stared at him, caught somewhere between fury and stunned relief. "You're not here to be agreeable," Raymond continued. "You're here to be a conscience this company forgot it needed." He stood, moving to the window, staring out at the gray city beyond. "This place," he said, voice low, "was built by people willing to do whatever it took to win. Somewhere along the way, they stopped asking if what they were winning even mattered." Serena said nothing. He turned back to her, eyes colder now, sharper. "You're going to help me fix it," he said. Serena folded her arms. "And what if they don't want it fixed?" Raymond smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Then we'll break it open and rebuild it from the bones up." The words hung between them, heavy with promise and threat alike. Serena felt something settle inside her, a grim, determined certainty. She wasn't here by accident. She wasn't here because of pity. She was here to expose the rot buried beneath the marble and the glass. And whether they liked it or not, Holt Dynamics was about to learn what real change looked like. The transformation didn't begin with a grand announcement. It began quietly. A memo, a few private meetings, a new policy draft that circulated the executive floor like whispered rumors. Raymond Holt and Serena Carter weren't just planning cosmetic reforms. They were preparing to rip the old machine apart, and the first step was waking up the people still trapped inside it. The following Monday, Serena stood in the center of Conference Room B, a cavernous space of glass and concrete that had hosted more betrayals than brainstorms. Around her sat 30 executives, each carefully shielded behind designer suits and polite indifference. They didn't know yet, but they were about to. Raymond stood beside her, silent, letting her take the floor. She didn't need a teleprompter. She didn't need a slideshow. She just needed them to listen. "My name is Serena Carter," she said, her voice cutting cleanly through the sterile air. "And I'm here because this company lost sight of the people who built it." A few bored glances, some faint, condescending smiles. "Good. Let them underestimate her." "You think success is inevitable," she continued, pacing slowly in front of them. "You think the buildings you sit in, the bonuses you cash, the power you wield, it's all permanent, like it's owed to you." She stopped, meeting their eyes one by one. "It's not." The room shifted uneasily. "Success," Serena said, voice hardening, "is rented. And the rent is due every day. In how you treat your employees, in how you treat your customers, in whether you remember that you're supposed to serve something bigger than your bottom line." A woman near the end of the table, sharp bobbed hair and an expensive watch, scoffed softly. Serena smiled at her, sweet and lethal. "Maybe you think I'm naive," Serena said. "Maybe you think people don't matter as long as the quarterly numbers look good." She turned, tapping the sleek conference table with one knuckle. "Ask Blockbuster, ask Kodak, ask Sears. Companies that forgot who they were, who thought they were too big to fall. Spoiler, they weren't." The scoffer's smirk faded. "You're standing on a cliff," Serena said. You can pretend you don't see the edge, but the ground is already cracking under you. Silence, the first fracture. Across the room, a young director leaned forward slightly, brows furrowing. A mid-level manager glanced nervously at his phone. Seeds of doubt planted carefully. Serena pressed on. Every bad headline you ignore, every loyal employee you discard, every customer you treat like a transaction instead of a person. It adds up. It always adds up. She let the words sink in before dropping the final blow. And one day you wake up to find out you don't own your success anymore. She stepped back. Raymond moved forward then, his voice low but carrying weight. This isn't just about PR, he said. It's about survival. He picked up a file from the table and dropped it with a heavy thud. Inside were hard numbers, surveys, internal reports, customer loyalty plummeting, employee retention collapsing, competitors circling like sharks. You can ignore Serena if you want, Raymond said, his voice cool. You can ignore the warnings, the signs, the bleeding. He leaned forward, hands braced on the table. But don't come crying to me when Holt Dynamics becomes the next forgotten empire rotting under dust and bad decisions. The tension in the room was electric. For a long moment, no one moved. No one spoke. Then slowly, the young director who had leaned forward earlier raised his hand. What do we do? He asked, voice tight with something close to fear or hope. Serena smiled. Finally. You start by looking around, she said. At every policy, every deal, every decision, you ask, who does this help? Who does this hurt? And if you can't answer those questions honestly, she paused. You don't sign it. You don't approve it. You fix it. It was a simple message, a radical one, and it was just the beginning. Raymond straightened, giving the room one last hard look. Mandatory leadership training begins next week, he said. Bias audits on all hiring practices start tomorrow. Department heads will be evaluated not just on profits, but on retention, ethics scores, and employee satisfaction. A low murmur rippled across the room. Good. Let them be afraid. Serena turned to leave, feeling the first real shift in the building's air. Witnesses were awakening. Some would resist, some would plot, some would cling to the old rot with bloodied hands. But others would remember what it was like to believe. Serena didn't need all of them. She just needed enough. As she and Raymond walked down the long, gleaming hallway toward the next battle, he glanced sideways at her. You're enjoying this, he said, almost accusing. Serena's smile was razor sharp. Damn right I am. Because for the first time, Holt Dynamics wasn't just a machine built for profit. It was becoming something worth fighting for. And she was just getting started. The next phase wasn't about speeches, it was about proof. If Serena Carter had learned anything from a lifetime of fighting uphill battles, it was that words meant nothing without receipts. In a world ruled by power and reputation, you didn't survive by hoping people believed you. You survived by making it impossible for them not to. The morning after the leadership meeting, Serena set up shop in an empty glass office 2 floors below the executive suite. It wasn't much, just a desk, a chair, and a humming laptop. But to her, it might as well have been a war room. Raymond had given her full authority, and she intended to use it. First, she called in Nora Winters. Despite their rocky beginning, Serena knew Nora was sharp, ruthless even. Someone who understood that survival wasn't just about playing the game. It was about knowing when to rewrite the rules. Nora arrived precisely on time, a tablet tucked under one arm and a guarded look on her face. You really think we can clean this place up? She asked, closing the door behind her. Serena smiled tightly. I don't think. I know. Nora raised an eyebrow but said nothing more. They got to work. Step 1. Pull every complaint that had ever been filed against Holt Dynamics internally. Not the sanitized reports presented to the board, the real ones. The ones buried under layers of red tape and corporate spin. What they found wasn't just bad, it was damning. Dozens of employee grievances marked resolved without any action. Reports of discrimination quietly dismissed. Customer feedback manipulated to protect senior management bonuses. And that was just the first week. Serena printed every document, She created folders, charts, timelines, paper trails so detailed and irrefutable that no amount of executive gaslighting could make them disappear. Step 2. Identify the rot. Serena and Nora compiled a list. Executives who had allowed the rot to fester. Department heads who had protected their own at the expense of everyone else. Managers who had bullied, silenced, and punished whistleblowers. Each name was a liability. Each one would have to answer for what they had done or what they had allowed to happen. Step 3. Protect the witnesses. Serena knew the moment they started shaking the foundation, retaliation would follow. Holt Dynamics had thrived on fear for too long. Good people had been crushed because they dared to raise their voices. Not this time. Serena drafted a protection plan with Raymond's blessing. Anonymous reporting channels, legal protections, emergency exits for anyone threatened or harassed. Because if they wanted the truth to come out, they had to make it safe for people to tell it. Step 4. Get the board ready. Raymond, for all his icy control, understood the stakes better than anyone. They needed the board, not just to stay silent, but to actively back the overhaul. Without that, the reforms would die in committee, strangled by old money and older minds. Serena scheduled a special review session 2 weeks out. No leaks, no rumors. Just enough time to gather every piece of evidence, every witness statement, every smoking gun. It wasn't just about cleaning house anymore. It was about making it undeniable. One afternoon, deep into their investigation, Nora slid a slim folder across Serena's desk. "You're going to want to see this," she said quietly. Serena opened it. Inside was a series of emails, not between low-level managers or mid-tier HR reps, but between two board members. Emails openly discussing how to sideline problematic hires. Emails referring to minority employees as quota fillers. Emails suggesting that employee terminations could be spun as cost-cutting efficiency measures to shareholders. Serena felt her stomach turn. This wasn't just negligence. It was systemic, planned, protected. She looked up at Nora, who met her gaze with a grim nod. "This isn't just a few bad apples," Nora said. "It's the orchard." Serena closed the folder carefully. "Then we burn it down," she said. That night, she stayed long after the rest of the building had emptied. Rain tapped against the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city below glittered like a distant memory. She sat at her desk, the evidence spread out before her like a map of betrayal. And yet, beneath the exhaustion, the fear, the righteous fury, there was something else stirring in her chest. Hope. Real hope. Not the naive, desperate kind she had clung to when she first walked through Holt Dynamics' gleaming front doors. No, this was something stronger, sharper, earned. They had the proof now. They had the witnesses. They had the power to tear down the rot and rebuild something new, something real. And Serena Carter? She wasn't afraid of the fight anymore. She was ready for it. The day of the confrontation dawned gray and heavy, the kind of morning that seemed to hold its breath. Inside Holt Dynamics, tension thrummed through the walls like electricity. Employees sensed something was coming. The elevators were slower. Conversations were shorter. Even the ever-smiling receptionist at the front desk looked uneasy. In the boardroom on the top floor, the stakes were about to shift forever. Serena Carter stood at the long mahogany table, a thick portfolio in hand. Behind her, Nora arranged the evidence displays. Not flashy, not dramatic, but devastating in their simplicity. Raymond Holt entered quietly, his presence stilling the room like a sudden drop in temperature. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The board members filed in, all tailored suits and practiced indifference. Men, and a few women, who had spent their lives learning how to wield power like a scalpel. They sat, exchanged thin-lipped smiles, and waited for whatever corporate theater they assumed would play out. They were wrong. Raymond gave a slight nod to Serena. "Showtime." She stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. She didn't offer greetings, didn't waste time with pleasantries. She placed the portfolio on the table and opened it. The first page was a complaint dated 2 years prior. Ignored. The second, another grievance, discrimination, retaliation, threats. Dismissed. Page after page, the documents piled up. This, Serena said, her voice steady, is a record of every complaint, every ignored warning, every silent casualty Holt Dynamics has accumulated over the last 5 years. A ripple moved through the room, unease replacing arrogance. Some of you were aware, she continued, flipping another page. Some of you chose not to be. It makes no difference now. One of the older board members, a silver-haired man named Whitaker, cleared his throat. Miss Carter, with all due respect, isolated complaints do not indicate systemic. They're not isolated, Serena cut in smoothly, pressing a button on the remote. Behind her, the screens lit up. Charts, graphs, timelines, names. A pattern so undeniable it could not be explained away with corporate jargon. Let's not insult each other's intelligence, she said, letting her gaze sweep the room. This wasn't negligence. It was convenience. Silence. Then from the far end of the table, a voice, snide, challenging. This sounds like a witch hunt, said Langford, the same executive Serena had sparred with during the negotiations. Serena smiled, slow and deliberate. No, Mr. Langford, she said, voice cutting through the tension like a blade. This is accountability, something this company has lacked for far too long. Langford's lips curled in disdain, but he said nothing. Raymond stepped forward then, folding his arms. This isn't up for debate, he said, his tone so cold it made the windows feel frosted over. The question is not whether Holt Dynamics needs to change. It's whether you are fit to lead it through that change. Several board members stiffened. Raymond continued, his words sharp and deliberate. Effective immediately, an independent oversight committee will be established. Every department head will undergo review, and every employee who fostered or protected systemic abuse will be removed. Whitaker bristled. That's extreme. Raymond's eyes hardened. What's extreme is allowing rot to fester until it threatens everything we've built. Serena could feel the shift in the room now, fear creeping in where smugness had lived. Good. Nora stepped forward, handing each board member a sealed envelope. Inside was their personal audit summary, a private ledger of everything they had signed, ignored, or enabled. No public accusations yet, but the warning was clear. Help fix this or be exposed. Raymond delivered the final blow. Those unwilling to adapt are free to resign immediately, he said. Golden parachutes have been revoked. Severance packages are void in cases of verified misconduct. No one moved. No one spoke. The room, once full of sharks, now smelled faintly of fear. Serena exhaled silently. They had done it. They had cracked the foundation. But she wasn't done yet. She stepped closer to the table, letting her next words hang heavy in the air. Holt Dynamics will no longer be a company that profits off silence, she said. We will be a company that earns its reputation, not through marketing slogans, but through action. Her gaze locked on each board member in turn. And make no mistake, this is not an offer. This is the future. You are either part of the solution or you are the past. She let the words linger, thick and final. Then she closed the portfolio with a soft, definitive snap. Raymond glanced at her, the barest hint of respect flashing in his eyes. Without waiting for a reply, Serena turned and walked out of the boardroom, her head held high, Nora following closely behind. Behind them, the murmurs began, hurried, anxious, desperate. Change had come to Holt Dynamics, and Serena Carter had brought it through the front door. The aftershocks of that confrontation reverberated through Holt Dynamics faster than anyone had anticipated. Within 24 hours, 3 board members tendered their resignations under the guise of personal reasons. By the end of the week, internal investigations led to the suspension of 5 more executives. Department heads whispered in hallways. Meetings were canceled, strategies rewritten. It was a controlled demolition, the old power structure crumbling, piece by piece, under the pressure of truth. But for Serena, the collapse was personal. Each day, she watched the changes ripple outward. She saw junior employees, secretaries, assistants, customer service reps, begin to walk taller. No longer just background noise in a machine designed to ignore them. She saw security officers nod at her with quiet respect. She noticed how Nora, once calculating and reserved, now leaned on Serena's judgment like a necessary compass. Still, The resistance was there. Some clung to the old ways, murmuring about overcorrections and optics. Some met Serena's eyes in elevators and then quickly looked away, unwilling to confront what they had enabled by staying silent. And some, the most dangerous, simply waited, hoping she would slip. Serena didn't care. The rot wasn't just being exposed, it was being excised. Raymond Holt, for all his ruthless precision, gave her room to maneuver. He didn't micromanage. He didn't second guess. He simply watched, testing whether she could finish what they had started. And Serena had no intention of failing. On a rainy Wednesday, a month after the boardroom reckoning, Serena convened her own meeting. Not in the executive suite, not in a sanitized conference room, but in the heart of Holt Dynamics, the open floor of the marketing division, where interns rubbed shoulders with managers, where ideas were born and crushed within minutes. She stood on a low platform hastily assembled from shipping pallets. No microphone, no scripted remarks, just her and 200 employees staring up at her, some wary, some hopeful, some merely curious. She inhaled once, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her shoulders, and then she spoke. "When I first walked into this building," she began, her voice cutting through the low murmur of the crowd, "I knew I wasn't what most of you expected." A few heads tilted, some nodded faintly. "I wasn't hired because of a perfect resume," she continued. "I wasn't the safe choice. I wasn't the obvious one." She paused, letting her gaze sweep the room. "I was hired because Holt Dynamics, whether it wanted to admit it or not, needed to change. And real change is messy. It's uncomfortable. It's disruptive." She saw it then, the subtle straightening of backs, the flickers of engagement in their eyes. "Good. So let's be very clear," she said, stepping forward. "We are not going back to how things were." Silence, heavy in charge. "If you're here to do the bare minimum, to climb ladders by stepping on others, to protect broken systems because they serve you, leave now." No one moved. She smiled slightly. "If you're here to build something better, not perfect, but better, then stay, work, fight, and understand this. Here, you will be seen." The room held its breath. And then, a sound. Applause. Not polite, not hesitant. Real. The kind that grew and swelled until it filled the space between the concrete pillars and glass walls. Serena exhaled slowly, feeling something unfurl in her chest. Not victory, not yet, but momentum. And that was enough. From that day forward, Holt Dynamics wasn't just rebuilding, it was transforming. Serena led the charge with a ferocity that startled even Raymond. Bias training programs that were once checkbox exercises became immersive, grueling experiences that forced executives to confront their privilege, their assumptions, their silent complicity. Recruitment policies were rewritten to prioritize not just diversity, but inclusion. True inclusion, where backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives were leveraged as strengths, not boxed away as liabilities. Vendor contracts were reviewed and renegotiated to favor minority-owned businesses, small startups, and ethical supply chains. And every week, without fail, Serena sat in an open forum, no titles, no scripts, where any employee could voice concerns, pitch ideas, or challenge decisions without fear of retaliation. Change wasn't easy. It never was. Some employees left, unwilling or unable to adapt. Some board members grumbled, their power diminished. Some competitors mocked Holt Dynamics' woke rebranding, confident it would crash and burn. They were wrong. Revenue dipped briefly, then stabilized, then soared, higher than ever before. Clients who once signed contracts out of obligation now championed Holt Dynamics as a standard bearer for a new era of corporate responsibility. Media outlets that had prepared obituaries about the company's inevitable fall now ran profiles about its unprecedented rebirth. And through it all, Serena remained relentless. Because she knew, better than anyone, that systems didn't collapse overnight. They rotted quietly, invisibly, until someone was brave enough to say, enough. And then, if they were lucky, if they fought hard enough, something stronger could rise from the ruins, Something that mattered. Something built to last. As Serena stood in her new office overlooking a city that no longer seemed quite so indifferent, she allowed herself a rare smile. The collapse wasn't the end, it was the beginning. And this time, she would make sure it was built right. 6 months after the collapse began, Holt Dynamics no longer resembled the company it had been. It was something entirely new, raw, leaner, and infinitely more powerful. And Serena Carter was its architect. The transformation wasn't just cosmetic. It wasn't just press releases and diversity statements. It was real, tangible, baked into every floor tile, every boardroom meeting, every contract signed. It began at the top. Raymond Holt, true to his word, stepped back publicly, transferring day-to-day operations to a newly formed executive leadership council, one that Serena chaired. Not a token committee, not window dressing, real authority. Half the council members were women. Nearly a third were people of color. Several were first-generation college graduates, or veterans, or individuals who had clawed their way up from poverty. They weren't chosen for optics. They were chosen because they had fought harder, endured more, and understood, in their bones, what building a truly equitable future required. The old guard muttered, "Of course." Some investors balked. But when quarterly earnings shattered previous records, when employee retention hit a company high, when major global clients lined up to partner with Holt Dynamics, those doubts evaporated. Success had always been the ultimate argument. Serena, however, knew better. She knew real change had to go deeper than profit margins. It had to reach into the marrow of the company's identity. And so she pushed further. The Community Investment Initiative launched that summer, funneling millions into local education programs, technology training centers, and small business incubators. Holt Dynamics no longer measured its impact solely by shareholder returns, but by community growth, employee well-being, and long-term sustainability. New employee onboarding included 2 weeks of cultural immersion training, not as punishment, but as foundation. Leadership promotions were tied not only to performance metrics, but to mentorship contributions and ethical leadership reviews. Annual reports didn't just highlight revenue. They included metrics on inclusion, on social impact, on measurable progress toward justice. Other companies scoffed. Some tried to imitate poorly, but none could match the authenticity Serena brought. Because she hadn't read about injustice in a case study, she had lived it. One evening, months into the transformation, Serena stood alone on the rooftop terrace of Holt Tower. Below, the city lights stretched endlessly, a mosaic of hope and hunger and ambition. Behind her, the company pulsed, a living, breathing organism that bore her fingerprints in every fiber. Footsteps approached softly. She didn't need to turn. "Raymond," she said simply. He joined her at the railing, hands tucked casually in his pockets. For a long moment, they said nothing, just two warriors surveying the battlefield they had reshaped. Finally, Raymond spoke, his voice low, reflective. "When I first offered you that envelope," he said, "I thought I was giving you a chance." Serena smiled faintly. "And now," he turned his head slightly, studying her, "now I realize you were giving me one." It wasn't a compliment. It was an acknowledgement. A rare and precious thing from a man like him. Serena inclined her head slightly, accepting it without diminishing it. "You could have chosen to look the other way," Raymond said after a beat. "Most would have." "I couldn't," Serena replied simply. "Not then. Not ever." He nodded once, a slow, deliberate motion. "They still won't make it easy for you," he said. "The world doesn't like being held accountable." "I know," Serena said, her gaze never wavering from the glittering skyline. "But I'm not here to make them comfortable." She was here to build something they couldn't ignore, a standard so high that no one would dare lower it again. Raymond chuckled under his breath. Not mockery, but admiration. "You're dangerous," he said almost fondly. Serena smiled wider. "Good." Silence fell again, companionable this time. Below them, Holt Dynamics throbbed with new life. Employees burning the midnight oil not out of fear, but out of belief, out of pride. In the distance, the sun began to rise, bleeding gold and crimson across the horizon. A new day, a new world. And Serena Carter, once a waitress serving kindness with grilled cheese sandwiches in a forgotten corner of the city, now stood at its threshold. She wasn't just part of the system anymore. She was the system, and she intended to make damn sure it was one worth believing in. Years later, Serena Carter's name meant something entirely different across the world. She was no longer the waitress who got lucky, no longer the outsider brought into Holt dynamics. She was a pioneer, a force, a living testament to the power of unseen kindness, the kind that demanded no reward but ended up changing everything. And it all began with a grilled cheese sandwich and a boy named Daniel. Today, that boy stood taller, a young man in a sharp navy suit, wheeling confidently onto a stage lined with hundreds of dignitaries, journalists, and world leaders. Behind him, an enormous banner read, "The Carter Holt Global Initiative for Social Innovation and Justice." The applause was thunderous. Serena sat in the front row, her heart thundering for an entirely different reason. She hadn't sought this spotlight. She never intended for her quiet acts of goodness to ripple outward and remake industries. But here they were. Daniel approached the podium, flashing her a grin before speaking into the microphone. "When I was 10, he began, voice steady, I sat alone in the rain outside a rundown diner. I was cold, I was scared, and I thought maybe I didn't matter." The audience leaned in, utterly still. "But someone saw me," he continued, his gaze finding Serena's. "Not just my disability, not my inconvenience. She saw me. And because she did, because she believed I deserved dignity and care, my whole life changed." Daniel's voice tightened, thick with emotion, but he pressed on. "And now, through this initiative, we will honor that legacy by ensuring no one is ever invisible again." The crowd erupted in a standing ovation. Serena remained seated for a long second, overwhelmed. She thought of every exhausted shift, every moment she wondered if kindness was enough in a world so broken. Every time she doubted whether small good deeds even mattered. They did. They mattered more than anything. As the applause roared around her, Raymond leaned over slightly, his voice low enough only she could hear. "You realize," he said dryly, "this is all your fault." Serena barked a soft laugh. "I'll live with it," she murmured. When the ceremony ended, dignitaries crowded around Daniel. Investors, philanthropists, heads of state, eager to bask in his light. But Daniel only had eyes for one person. He wheeled over with the ease of someone who had stopped apologizing for taking up space long ago. "Come with me," he said simply. Serena rose, walking beside him as they slipped out of the grand hall and into a quiet garden beyond. For a moment, neither spoke. The world faded to nothing but rustling leaves and the low hum of city life beyond the gates. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "You could have given up," he said quietly. "Back then, you could have decided I wasn't your problem." Serena shrugged. "Didn't seem like much of a choice." He turned toward her fully, his expression more serious than she'd ever seen. "You changed my life," he said, "not just by feeding me, but by believing I mattered without needing a reason." Serena swallowed hard. "You changed mine too," she said. "You reminded me that small things aren't small." Daniel grinned crookedly. "You're going to have to get used to it, you know." "Get used to what?" "Being the reason things get better," he said simply. Serena chuckled, brushing imaginary lint from her jacket. "I guess I can live with that too." As they stood there side by side, the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, a brilliant shaft of light warming the cold marble paths. A sign, a promise, that acts of compassion could ripple farther than any wave of cruelty. That injustice could be fought, not just with protests and policies, but with grilled cheese sandwiches, with standing your ground when no one else will, with believing that no one is too small to matter. Later that evening, as Serena packed up her speech notes, she found a crumpled napkin tucked into her folder. In Daniel's scrawled handwriting were just 5 words. "You fed more than me." Tears prickled at the corners of her eyes, but she didn't wipe them away. She let them fall, a baptism for the journey ahead. Because this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Serena Carter's story wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about a rags to riches fantasy. It was about the legacy of radical kindness in a world that so often forgot it, about the invisible becoming undeniable, and about how one woman, standing soaked in the rain on Lexington Avenue, dared to change the future, one forgotten soul at a time. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to catch more gripping stories like this. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.